Welcome everybody to Embodied Impact. Today we have the privilege of sharing the space with Ellie Bungay, and she is a sensual empowerment photographer, creating space for women to connect to and explore their sensuality and sexual expression without shame and fear of judgment. She is the creator of Sensuality Sessions, a feminine embodiment coach, an energetic and spiritually led dominatrix, and a kink educator. I came across your work when I started following you about a year ago and loved the manner in which you portrayed the woman you were shooting. Every shot, honestly, is so beautifully thought out, and there is this stunning duality of the soft feminine, but yet an absolute fierceness as the undertone. And I hope that's probably what you're going for. Watching you grow in your own embodiment and embracing and showcasting Mistress Stone has what I can only imagine be an expansive journey for you. And stepping right in, I would love to know how the culmination of all these parts started for you and bringing you to who you are today.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm actually in a program that I'm trying to keep my ego small. That's not really helping what you just did, but I'm going to take it all on board.
Embrace it.
Gosh, I always find this question. I mean, I love this question, and I talk about it a lot in everything that I do. And I guess my biggest challenge with it is how do I keep it small? How do I keep my answer not 3 hours long? My journey to where I am now has been pretty long and quite dark in a lot of ways. I spent more than the first half of my life, really, anything up until the age of about 30, really living from the neck up. Like I was so disembodied. I was so disconnected from myself, from my authentic expression, I was aware of my sexual energy and its power, but I was terrified of it. I found it, I didn't know what to do with it. It was kind of overwhelming. It was kind of frightening to have that level of energy and that level of connection and that level of what I now know is a strength and a power, living in a society, a patriarchal society, in which if you don't know how to manage it and maintain it and set boundaries, it can be quite dangerous and harmful. I was, lots of things. Eating disorders, body dysmorphia, addiction, abusive relationships, bad relationship with sex, bad relationship with myself, lots of stuff, which all culminated in a giant breakdown about 4 years ago, which is the best thing that ever happened to me. I was addicted to gambling for about 15 years, which was just all a process of numbing. I couldn't deal with life on life terms. I couldn't deal with feeling with emotions, with sitting with emotions. It was all too much. So yeah, it culminated in this breakdown, which kind of was in alignment with me working in this big corporate job in which I was like really stifled, and I was portraying this woman that I believed I needed to be to make it in the corporate world that was so far from who I am. It was like I was imprisoning myself daily. And yeah, it all came crashing down in a very dramatic way, which is not surprising now that I realize my expression of who I am is very dramatic. And I joined a recovery program for my gambling and started working with a sponsor, started a spiritual journey, and started peeling back the layers of hiding, basically, and starting to reveal who I was and starting to really actually want to get to know her, and started to face head on these aspects of myself that I used to be terrified of, that I genuinely believed that my sexual power and energy and my desire to be involved in sex in so many ways made me a bad person, and it made me somebody that would not be, the good girl or wife material or all of that. And I'm going to use inverted commas for all of those things because I don't believe in any of those constructs or labels. But that's what I was conditioned to believe. And around that time, I think I started working in sex work. And it was the most liberating, empowering, alchemizing, transformational thing I could have ever done. Like, it was like I had this thing that I was terrified of that was like here outside of me, like this power that was like almost destructive because I didn't have a hold of it. And by working in the realm of sex work, it was like I managed to like kind of lasso it and pull it in and embody it and be in control of it and use it in a way that felt empowering and use it in a way that helps people and heals people, and like use this power in such a positive way, but also feel like I was back in control of myself. And that then, at the time, I was also doing photography. So photography was my space where when I had severe high functioning anxiety for about 20 years, I was just like a rattling empty bottle of something, you know, just constantly jittery and couldn't focus and couldn't be present. Being present was so uncomfortable that I did anything to be present. Photography was the first space I found where I could be fully present and I felt like I could breathe, and I just got lost in it. Like, it was such a beautiful space. When we went into lockdown, my business that I had in photography collapsed because I was shooting actors and dancers, and their industry collapsed, so did mine. And I kind of had to start again. And I was like, okay, well, I love sensual empowerment and my sex work, and I love photography. So how can I combine these two things and make that into something? And I started, basically, I spent 4 months in lockdown. I had a really great time, by the way, which I was still really guilty about because I know it was a global pandemic and loads of bad stuff happened, but I had a really great time. I
I think
spent like 5 months.
it's been a very healing journey for a lot of people, ironically.
Mm, mm, absolutely. I Yeah, I spent about 4 or 5 months just taking sensual self-portraits of myself and really exploring that space. And that was like, God, I couldn't believe the power of what it was doing. Like, it was empowering me, it was liberating me, it was releasing all these layers of shame and all these layers of fear, and it was enabling me to have better relationships with myself and with other people, including like my family and my friends and my partners, and like the confidence and everything. And I just was like, oh, I wish I could just bottle this up and give it to every woman in the world. And then I was like, oh no, wait, I can do that. I can do that. I'm a photographer. I can just create space and do this for women. And so that's where Authentique came out of that space. Yeah, I think that's, like I said, this is a really hard question for me because I could keep going now for like another 2 hours.
Well, I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful because there's just so much in terms of what you're talking about that I think so many people can
Mm,
connect with, and the more you've
mm,
got, the better.
mm. Yeah, so I guess then following on from that, at this time, I kind of started to discover the Mistress Stone element of myself. Um, my journey with that's been, I've actually got quite a common journey. I think what I've heard from the kink community anyway is that I was submissive for a very, very long time in my personal life, and I played in that space a lot. I enjoyed the respite. The I enjoyed being able to surrender and come out of my head and go into subspace. It was something that was really freeing and really relaxing and really amazing for me. And I had partners who were dungeon masters, and I learned a lot from them in that space. But then I began to switch between the two, which is quite a common journey, because once you start to explore one side deeply, you kind of want to taste of the other side because you see it, and then you play between the two. And then I went really full the other way, and then was like, oh no, like I'm definitely, now I've experienced my dominant side, that's actually where I am. And it was like a full body drop into that connection. It was 100% definitely who I am. And I met this group of wonderful women who I'm kind of working with stuff now, who are also dominatrix, but they are, so what I like to try and talk about, and this is the thing that I spoke to you about with the picture for the podcast, to give a little bit of context of that comment. I really stressed over what picture I was going to send for the podcast, because I can take these really big decisions and make them easily, and then these tiny little decisions freak me the fuck out, and I lose my mind over it. And I lost my mind over what picture to send for ages. And then I sent this, like, I was like, I don't know how do I represent Ellie, like, as all three? I don't know how to do that. Okay, I'm going to send this one that's like smiley and laughy because I spend most of my time laughing. So I was like, let's do that. And then it came up with the title Mistress Stone, and I was like, oh my god, no, that's not Mistress Stone, that's Ellie. shit, that needs to come down. I need to put a more mistressy picture up. I need to put like a harder picture. I need to be in latex, like it has to be. And I had to catch myself in that thought process and be like, you're literally going against everything that you're trying to do. And when you're trying to express to people that are potentially new to the kink scene, or interested in being a dominatrix or expressing the dominant side, that you don't have to be a certain way, you don't have to fit in a box, you don't have to look a certain way to do anything. That's essentially what I do in everything that I'm doing, is that authentic expression is whatever yours is. It doesn't have to fit a box. It's the same with sensuality, it's the same with domination, it's the same with being yourself. So I came full circle and was like, the picture's fine. After like 25,000 voice notes of me freaking out, I was then like, actually, it's fine. Just go with the first picture I sent.
It was beautiful seeing that transition of you accepting everything that you were putting across there. So when you have women that approach you, what are the key things that they want to get out of the experience with you?
In which element are we in?
In the sense of learning from you as being the dom,
the dominatrix.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm finding the most is that what I'm trying to express and share is what I felt like I was missing when I first came into the space. So I met a lot of very traditionally sort of traditionally embodied doms. So like a little bit sterner, you know, like kind of stayed in character, very like bossy, very like ordering people around all the time. And I kind of came into the space and I was like, oh, I really know I want this, but I can't be that. I don't think I can be that. So maybe I can't do this actually. Maybe this is not for me. I got it wrong. And I nearly backtracked and stopped doing it all. And then I met this incredible woman who is now one of my best friends. And she's this lovely, soft, spiritual, nurturing, motherly type, but a fierce and incredible dominatrix. And people will literally fall at her feet because she has this incredible energy, but she was soft with it. And that gave me permission to follow that route myself. So now I kind of want to give back in the sense of creating that space for other women who come in. So what I find is a lot of the ones that are coming were like, oh, I didn't realize I could be spiritual and be a dominatrix, or I didn't realize I could be nurturing and be a dominatrix, or I didn't realize I could be playful and like laugh while I was doing it. And I guess I'm just offering a very open and expansive introduction to what it can look like, and helping to guide women through unearthing what your authentic expression of being a dominatrix might look like. Essentially, I'm doing what I'm doing in, it's funny because everything, I have all these parts of me, but they all have this undercurrent of the same thing, which is authenticity, you know, and being able to be who you are and express who you are without having to fit in a box. So yeah, it tends to be women that have maybe wanted to express it or wanted to step into that world, but they're too frightened by what feels like a very harsh, and because it can be quite intimidating if you know nothing about it, and there's people like head to toe in leather, like brandishing a whip. It's quite scary to just step into that space and be like, I want to do that. But if somebody is sat there dressed normally, normally, I don't like that word, but you know what I mean, not dressed head to toe in latex.
Civilian.
Yeah, civilian. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess yeah. I enjoy giving women permission to be whoever they want to be. That's one of my favorite things in the world.
I think what I'm really curious about, like, what are kind of the early steps into that world of like kink? And you spoke about like, did you say like dungeon masters or something like this? It's like it's a whole like subculture of like terminology, and it sounds so fun.
It's really fun. Yeah, I think actually it's something that I've spoken about with my friends that we will work with in the community. And we spoke about making a dictionary, and having that somewhere, because one of the things when I came in, people, like when I first started doing it, so actually when I first started, I was doing OnlyFans in lockdown, but through a fourth persona. Now I really do sound like a kleptomaniac. Through a fourth persona who is Elle Authentique, who was basically my pole dancing stripper persona. So I was doing OnlyFans through that, and I had a couple of people request me for like some foot fetish and some kink stuff, and I was like, I'm stuck at home, I've got nowhere to go. Let me just try this and see what it's like. And instantly I was like, oh, this is really fun. Okay, yeah, I want to do some more of this. But I spent my first 6 months as a dominatrix Googling everything, because people would email me with a request with like 25 different acronyms of all these, like, you know, like even, obviously the most obvious being like BDSM, but they're all like different things like CFM and like COP. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, can you do this? And I'm like,
1 sec.
yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I know what that is. That's fine. So yeah, I think it is. I think that's why I like to create as much as possible, an inviting and open space that doesn't feel like intimidating, because even like saying something like dungeon master sounds so, like, even dungeon sounds intimidating, because the connotations of a dungeon for a normal context conversation is somewhere where you go and have bad things done to you, or you go when you've done things that are bad. So to be like, oh, I go and play in the dungeon kind of feels like an oxymoron, I guess, in the average use of the language. So yeah, a lot of what I do in that space.
What's really interesting for me is also the duality that you bring in terms of the clients that you work with. I mean, I know there's just sort of a snippet of the clientele that you work with, but the amount of respect that you have for them in terms of what they're needing as well, not only the education front for the woman that you're working with. And that's really nice to see that you hold that space for both in what you do.
I think it's, for me anyway, and this is not any kind of judgment or any kind of critique on any of the dominatrix, but it's really important that you have a respect for men and a respect. I work mainly with men purely because women don't pay for it as much. They just don't. I would love to have female clients. I'm very open to female clients, but they just don't come through the doors as much as male clients, unfortunately. But there is an element of, so one of the things that I do to really safeguard myself and my clients, I think a lot of people think is that a dominatrix is they hate men, right? And they want to go out there and beat up men, and you get to do that in that space. If I have even a tiny element of feeling like I have a resentment towards a client, I'll stop seeing them, because I can't be in that space when I'm holding anything against them, because I'm not in control, and there's the potential that I could be damaging, and not even just in a physical way, in an emotional, energetic, or a physical way, a mental way, sorry. So, but I do have a huge respect. I feel like a healer. That's what it feels like in those sessions, and a lot of the time it's 50% of the actual play and 50% of holding and aftercare and conversations and therapy. Hence why I was like, I need to train to be a coach as well, because I'm in these spaces that are like, I need to be able to hold people safely. So that's the element that I love about it.
It's such an important factor, because it's a lot of the clients that I work with are also in the kink space, and it's the amount of healing that I hear people go through. Let's say, for instance, it's just shibari as an example, and the moment of absolute letting go. I just think that this is something that we're not taught really growing up, is how to just completely surrender and let go. And I wonder how does that sort of play out in the sessions that you run?
I love this question. So I have various different elements. Because I work quite energetically and I'm quite spiritually led, I have a small technique that I like to do in the beginning. When I have a new client, there's always a signal to the beginning of the space, and that can be different for whatever. It's all independent and individual on each person. Mine is placing a collar on, just because it's quite symbolic. But what I like to do is as I do that, I get them to take a really, really deep breath and hold the breath at the top. And then I ask them, when they're releasing that breath, to relinquish everything, to release all, and to drop into the space. So it's almost like in a meditation. And you can physically see that everything drop, the shoulders drop, the body drop, everything go. And then it's in. And then it's about then maintaining that space and not allowing the energy to drop. I think that is the key, because if you kind of snip out of it, it's like meditation. That's what it feels like to me. It's like opening and leading a meditation. It just happens to involve latex and leather and whips and chains.
Sounds like a better meditation, personally.
Agreed. The other interesting thing about the space, I just thought of when you were just saying that before, that I just want to quickly share. One of the things with, obviously, we have healing through BDSM, which is something that isn't spoken about. But I think the other thing that's not spoken about as much is the exploration and the exploration of yourself and your character and your relationships. So when we're children, we play all the time, right? We play, we explore with other people, we play different roles, we role play basically as children. And we get to try on these different people and different ways of communicating, see how it works. And that person gets to try that back and see how that works, but in a safe space because it's play. We get to being an adult, or not even an adult, maybe probably like 12 or 13. It's younger and younger when our childhood is being taken away, really. And we stop doing that. And we're just supposed to know how to interact and know how to have these healthy relationships and boundaries and how to explore our parts of ourselves. For me, what BDSM provides in the scenes, in the sessions, in the play, whatever you would like to call it, is this element of play where you can explore these different areas and learn how to interact with people and learn how to be in different ways in relationships and set these boundaries. And maybe I want to be this person, and perhaps if I speak like this, it feels good. And I think it's definitely made my relationships much stronger.
It's really beautiful. I actually love to hear a bit more, like, how do you set that safe container? What are the agreements or the rules that you set up from the get-go?
So it's I say it was similar for, sorry, I'm really superstitious. There's a magpie at my window. I had to do that. I just wanted to explain why I was doing that. So I'll talk about it as though if it was a client. It's very similar in a personal space, really, but just to kind of clarify what I'm talking about. So before I've even met them in the dungeon or even got to that space, I have a set of questions that I'll ask them initially, which involves like, do you have any experience in BDSM or in this world at all? Do you have any health issues or any physical limitations or any mental health problems that I should know about? Hard nose and turn-offs, fantasies and fetishes, so you can get an idea of which way both ends of the scale. Any like real limits, so anything that's like for whatever reason is something that just doesn't work. I also ask them if they can actually afford my fee, and I don't mean that in a way of I'm being like, can you afford me, as in like I mean it as a way to safeguard them, like do you have the financial means, because sometimes with fetishes people can spend, it can become quite damaging to them. They'll spend more than they can actually afford because they need that space. And then we'd also so some people use a safe word, which would be one word that you use when something goes too far. But the problem for me with that is that stops everything immediately. And if someone was to use a safe word with me, I would immediately stop. Everything would end. The energy would drop. It would be over. I like to use the traffic light system, which is quite widely used as well, which means that I would have orange for that's okay, but don't go any further with that. But that means you can still stay in the space in the energy zone. And red is like stop immediately. And they're told that if they use red, the session's ended and it's not starting again. So they know that that's like, so there's the kind of safety element of coming in. I then, when I have the very first session with someone, I find out what their general likes are. And then I allow them in that first session to give me feedback. It's the only time I ever allow them to do that. And they're very aware of how lucky they are to be able to do that in that first session. But I allow them that little bit of space. So I will, it will be kind of like, say, for example, if it was corporal punishment, which is using various different tools to sort of flog and spank, etc., I would use one and then I would ask them to measure it 1 to 10 for me on how that feels, if it's too much, if it's too intense, if they like it. Then once I've done that session, then we can go into these full play scenarios where I know their limits, I understand their energy, and I use different words and language with them, and I watch how they react, not just like their voice, but how their body moves, how their energy moves. So I can see, like, I can just learn a lot from someone by spending that first session with them, and then I can then take them into that really deep subspace on the second time, where I know I can hold it safely because I know them individually of their limits and their boundaries and their likes and dislikes. And because just as much as like something being unsafe could end a session. Something they really didn't like could also end a session, even if it wasn't unsafe or damaging, just because it was something that I hadn't checked. Oh, actually, if I use the word sissy, they're going to be like, oh no, it's done. I'm out of the space. So it's quite complex, actually. But I think that's why I love it so much. I like the exploration of, it's like I see my journeys with my clients as like relationships, very boundaried, very carefully constructed relationships, but yeah, definitely relationships in that sense.
I think it would have to be, because I mean, in many respects, like you were talking about the coaching before, that there's the somatic side, which most people think that, you know, being a dom or dominatrix is just about the body and inflicting whatever it is that the person, you know, needs to be pushed through. But then there's the psychological side, which I love the way that you kind of use that initial session as that assessment space to kind of get a better feel for that person, and then knowing where their limitations and slowly pushing and pushing and pushing until you've kind of reached that precipice.
I guess, yeah, it's like, I think the duty of care, I guess. Like you're going into quite a very vulnerable, a very exposed space, in the same way that, like, before I do a shoot with a client who I'm going to do a sensual shoot with, I will ask them certain questions. I will have a consultation with them, find out why they're doing it, find out any history, any reasons, any barriers. I've actually before had a client where I ended up bringing in somebody else because I wanted to safeguard her because she'd had some sexual trauma, and I'm trauma informed, but I don't have enough experience in it. So I feel like it's like, I guess maybe because I know how deep I take people, I'm kind of like, I just want to make sure you're okay before I do that.
It's, you know, before you were talking about the dictionary of let's call it kink for a better phrase. I wonder if part of that needs to be creating a handbook for kink too, because, you know, it's that idea of duty of care is so important when you're doing that body work. And I just think that even people sort of stepping into the space need to have that as the primer for stepping into that, and having that as a baseline, which I think a lot of people forget.
Absolutely. I think the idea, you know, it's such a powerful space that can do so much good. You know, I love how you spoke straight away about healing. Like, it is such a healing space. It's a liberating space. You know, it can improve relationships. It can improve boundary setting. It improves your confidence. It enables you to make better decisions. Like, all of this amazing stuff. But because it has that power, you have to also, it can't be taken too lightly. You know, I guess it's like, I don't know what a parallel would be, actually. That's really hard, actually. Maybe there isn't a parallel. It's a special world. There is no parallel.
I think it's a unique one.
I think it's been really interesting. I want to go back a little bit when you were speaking earlier that you felt kind of like basically disconnected from the neck down. And then, like, how did you journey into that world of kink, of domination, being a dominatrix? Like, what were your kind of like steps, and how did you, in a way, kind of like reconnect? And then also, how did you learn to channel your sexual energy? Because it seemed like you were really like deeply afraid of actually the power that you were. And now, I mean, even when you speak, there's this beautiful fullness that sort of like comes on like all frequency bands.
Thank you. So yeah, I worked with a lot of amazing women. Part of the reason why I've trained as an embodiment coach, or training as an embodiment coach, is because I did a lot of work with embodiment coaches. Movement is one of my biggest things. So I pole dance and I lap dance and any kind of dancing where I get to be empowered in that sexual space. That was one of the biggest liberators for me, because I realized that when I started moving in it, I could feel its power in a really positive and really, it didn't feel unsafe, I think, for the first time. It felt like I could express it in this really safe space. And I mean, movement is something that now I don't know how I manage my life without it. how I survived. You know, I went a few weeks recently because I had a back injury and I couldn't go to any classes. I couldn't move at all, really. And when I finally went back, oh my gosh, I came out of it and I was like, how have I survived without that? Like, I'm just so deeply present and embodied when I'm in that space. And the connection, before I could make the connection with other people, I had to reconnect with myself, right? It's the same, the cheesy things of like, you know, you have to love yourself before you can love anybody else, la la la. It's the same with sexuality, with embodiment, with sexual energy. Like, I had to rebuild that. And that's still a journey that I'm on. Like, it's still something that I have to constantly work on. Like, it's very easy to lose that really deep connection if you get to, I am very prone to my attention being up here, and I have to kind of constantly pull it back down all the time. So dance and movement and pole dancing specifically, and it's funny because we give like feedback to each other at the end of the classes when, like, it's really lovely. My teacher's incredible and I really like the environment she creates. It's similar to like what I like to create in my spaces, so I'm really drawn to it. And we all give feedback on each other. And this one girl was like, you just move so essentially, like you just look like the way you look at the mirror. And I was like, that's because I fancy myself. She was like, what? And I was like, I'm literally dancing for myself. Like, through doing OnlyFans and through creating all of this content, this sexual content that I was making on my own, I had a full-blown relationship with myself for about 6 months where I was really, really attracted to myself and really turned on by myself. Like, and not just in a way where if someone would masturbate, they would be like, oh, I feel aroused, I'm going to go and masturbate. In a way where I was like actively activated by my own sexual energy, that it was almost like looking at another person and being aroused. That was so incredibly powerful. And then I felt like I do a lot of meditation, so I learned how to move energy through my body quite well. I actually had this incredible experience, which still gives me shivers when I think about it. My first ever in person in the dungeon with an actual client dom experience, and he was fabulous. He was so lovely to be my first client. He really was perfect. And he came in, and we have this kind of little bit where, you know, you do the tribute and then they go and take a shower. That's how I do it anyway. It kind of helps to kind of start the session. And he went in to go and take the shower, and I sat in this chair in the corner of the room, and I was like, I have this thing where I'm excited and I'm nervous, and I'm like, okay, so nerves and excitement manifest themselves the same way in the body. So every time I feel nervous, I just tell myself I'm excited, trick my little brain, and it's fine. And I'm sat in this chair and I'm like, okay, I'm really excited. And then I just kind of focused inwards a little bit, and I had this unbelievable image, feeling, visualization, sensation. I don't know. It was like entire body of like my sacral chakra, but it was literally bright orange and as big as a tennis ball, and it was like glowing out of me, and it was almost overwhelming. And I kind of was like, okay, what do I do here? I was like, you know, like, just breathe into it. And I breathed into it, and it went through, like, down my legs, up my arms, everywhere. It was like I was back in the day and I'd taken a shitload of drugs. Like, that was what it felt like. I just felt like the biggest natural high ever, but so empowering and energizing. So when he came out, I just glided through the whole thing. Like, this energy just carried me through. And that kind of, once I'd experienced the transformative power of my sexual energy, it stripped away the fear and the shame and enabled me to start to express it in a way that felt safe, because it started to feel like, oh, this is a gift that I have. This is not something to be afraid of. Like, this is something to share with other people that is beautiful, and there doesn't need to be any shame, because look what it can do.
It's so beautiful. You're speaking to the converted already. I mean, this is really one of the central things that I always try and bring into, whether it be individual therapy, working as a sex therapist. It's incredible to see how many people are detached from their sexual self, and that embodiment that you're talking about there is the most illuminating experience when someone completely surrenders to their sexual self. But in getting to that space, you know, I love all the examples that you're giving, and I hope that people listening to this can take that as a takeaway, not only as, you know, for the individual, but as the couple as well. And I wonder if, you know, do couples come and see you as well?
I haven't had any couples, but I'm so open to it. Like I would really love to. And I do have like friends who have worked a lot with couples. Um, I really would love to explore that because I definitely use a lot of what I've learned in my own relationships. Um, so I know the huge benefit. I mean, mainly around, I guess what I found actually from everything that I do. So anything that I've done in sex work and everything in the domination space, communication, communication, communication. That's literally like to me the hottest thing, the sexiest thing in the world is someone who can just communicate clearly and honestly and loudly and be completely honest. Like there's nothing that turns me on more than that. Like it's just, but it was so terrified of it. Was so terrified of it, but it is terrifying. I'm still scared of it. I had I had a big conversation with my partner recently where we were like, right, we're gonna do hard truths. We're gonna do a hard truth session, and like said the shit that you're not supposed to say to people. You know, like the stuff you're told, like you don't tell your partner you thought that. That you're not supposed to tell them that. But it's so liberating. And I guess in the dominatrix space, these people are coming to me and they're telling me these things that they are too scared to tell anyone else. You know, and that practice of if you can share your deepest darkest fetish with someone, then you can share your deepest darkest fear with someone, or your biggest insecurity, or you know, I really don't like it when you do this thing, which is a terrifying thing to say, especially if you're a chronic people pleaser. To have to turn around to say to someone, I don't like when you do that. It's like, oh.
But I think this is also on the back of creating that safety, or that space of safety for people. And I think you so artfully do that. And that's really where I start as a practicing point, is trying to create that safety that both parties don't emotionally obliterate one another in that kind, or individually for that matter. And then it's doing that pressure testing and putting that person under the pressure and the hard truths, as you call it, which I think the reality is that if we can get to that stage in a relationship, or even individually, you know, you meet your authenticity, but then you also meet the authentic other. And I think that's just so important in being able to see that beautiful balance of, we have all this amazing stuff on one hand, but we have in equal measure the shitty stuff on the other, and we have to accept that.
It's like it's my one of my bestest friends in the world always says to me, contrast, contrast, contrast. Like nothing can exist without contrast. You know, dark and light, day and night, yin and yang, etc., etc. Pain and joy, right? You know, you can't. I always say to people, I'm so grateful for my addiction, and everyone's like, what? Really? 15 years of pain, and I'm like, yeah, but I went to that place. I went to the darkest place possible, which has enabled me to be able to go to the lightest place possible now. And I genuinely don't think I could do that without having had that experience. And I think in the same way that we have those external experiences, we have that internally. You know, we all have darkness and light. And it's very easy to share your light because it feels great and it makes other people feel great. And we all want to do it. But sharing your darkness is like the scary stuff, but that's the most powerful. And that's actually the most, like, I'm not saying you're not being authentic if you're sharing your light, because it is part of your expression. But one of the things I try and do, or I challenge part of the reason I called my business Authentic was to remind myself to always be authentic and always show up, like on social media, to my clients. Like I had a client recently who was a bit nervous to come to me, and because she was actually I don't want to disclose it, but she had some things that she was nervous to disclose. And then I voice noted her and I went, this is me. And I told her all my shit. And she was like, oh, okay. Actually, no, I feel all right then now to do that. So by me just saying to her all of my dark, yeah, she was then comfortable. I wouldn't expect anybody to go somewhere that I wouldn't be willing to go myself.
Yeah, it's a good practice.
Yeah.
So actually going deeper into the darkness piece, like how do you share darkness in ways that are like in energetic integrity, where it's not like dumping on others, but I'm sharing it while being clear that it's mine?
So, okay, I'll give you an example. So when I do the sensuality sessions, they're really long, you know, they're from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. I'm there from 9. I don't really leave till about 8. It's a very long day. I shoot with 6 women across that time. Energetically, it's quite a lot. So I really need to be starting from a place of very like fullness and high energy, and just I need to be really well stocked in the morning before that day. I did one a couple of months ago, and I'd just been through a really bad period of anxiety. I'd had a lot of stuff happen that had brought up a lot of trauma wounds, and I was not feeling very well sourced at all. And I was really nervous. I was like, I'm not going to be able to hold space for these women today. I'm not feeling, this is going to be really hard. And then I came on my period like the day before, and I was like, okay, really challenging me now. And I just was like, fuck it. I'm just going to go in. I'm just going to tell them. But I didn't. I made sure that I went in a way that was like, I just told them my truth. I just said, you know, I'm on my period today, girls. So just telling you that's happening. I've had a really anxious time this week, but I'm here. And actually, my biggest fear is that I won't be able to hold this space for you properly. But I'm telling you that I'm here 100% to try and do that for you. And just by sharing that with them, it was one of the most incredible sessions I've had. And actually, by being in that space while I was on my bleed and being around these women was so nurturing. We all just ended up just hugging all day. And they were all so lovely. Like the first girl I shot with, she was like, "Are you taking breaks today? Do you want a cup of tea? I'll get you a cup of tea. You haven't sat down yet for a cup." And I was like, "Hang on a minute, who's free? I'm being looked after." So by sharing that with them in a way that was, I guess it's how you energetically say it. That sounds a little bit like hippy dippy, but like you can say something in a way that's like, "Oh, I'm feeling really bad today, and I think today's probably going to be shit because I feel shit." You know that, or you can say, "Look, I want to be truthful with you because I respect you all, and I want to make sure I can give you the best out of today. So this is my shit, but I'm here and I'm showing up fully to be the best that I can." It's the difference between how you present it. And then I then provided that space for a really good friend of mine the next following week. So she facilitates a lot of my events, Amelia, incredible sexual healer, amazing woman. And she messaged me in the morning and was like, "I'm really worried. I'm not feeling my full self today. I don't think I can do one-to-ones all day. I don't want to let you down. I don't want to let the women down." Who are really, really panicking. And I was just like, "Look, I don't expect anything from you apart from you to show up and be fully you. You just show up, you be you, and whatever you do will be perfect." And she was like, I burst into tears at the tube station. She's like, "I've never been given permission in a workspace before to just fully be myself, and it'd be okay for me to not be fully okay." So I think it's like this cyclical energy is what it feels like for me. Like I create this space for people. I received that back. The women gave it back to me in that space, and it was so beautiful. Like I still think about that day, and the energy stayed with me for days afterwards. I actually ended up going in an upward curve for a few days after that because of how much they gave me.
I always have my couples hat on, and you know you're really speaking to something I think is so important when doing a lot of couples work as well, and that's I guess this unspoken permission to the other to be whatever they need to be. And I think we forget that so often. And I guess what I'm really curious about is what you were talking before about, you know, you have a partner and you're in this particular space. You know, how did you actually get that across to them? And I guess to be accepting, to be on board, to be understanding, what was the conversation around that?
With regards to like the sex work and the dominatrix stuff and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
So
I guess everything.
everything. I was
Everything.
everything, just all of it. I literally, so we met, well, technically we met actually when we were at university together. So we've actually known each other for a really long time, but we reconnected about a year and a half-ish ago. And I was just very, very, I mean, he knew me, you know, he knew I had OnlyFans. That was the thing already. And I was just very kind of clear on this is who I am. I was like, I do sex work, I'm a dominatrix, I do these things, I'm polyamorous, I'm pansexual, like, this is who I am. Like, I just, you know, this is me. I like you. If you like me for all of this as well, that's cool. Like that. I was just very, very, I think I was fortunate that I was at that point so comfortable and confident in who I was that anybody that came in, I was just like, this is me and this is who I am. I mean, I guess the polyamory element just helped because we're already kind of what's the word, navigating that space. So it makes, so the sex stuff kind of all comes in, because it's all about, again, it's all about communication, it's all about boundaries, it's all about expectations, it's all about checking in. You know, we regularly check in, like, how does this feel for you? This is happening. Is this good for you? Is there anything that needs to change? Is it, etc., etc., on both sides. So I mean, for me, it makes the relationship better, because it's almost like one of the things I really enjoyed. So when I first started, I've never spoken about this out loud on a podcast on anything before, so let's just do it. So when I first started doing sex work, I started doing sugar dating. That was the first thing that I did. And I loved it because these people just came to you and went, I would like X, Y, and Z. These are my expectations and these are my boundaries and this is what I have to offer. And I was like, cool, I have X, Y, Z. These are my expectations and boundaries and this is what I have to offer. And then you would find a match that worked that way. A little bit more, you know, matter of fact and transactional than an actual relationship maybe would be. But the structure and the basis of it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. People just say what they want, ask for what they want, everybody gets what they want and everyone's happy and there's nice clear boundaries and there's like, oh, this is really nice. I've never had this before. And I think I then carried that through then when I started in my relationships, like my personal relationships, as well as friendships and family. It hasn't just been in romantic or sexual relationships. It's been in all aspects of my life. And it's also enabled me to really see what I don't want as well as seeing what I do want. So I've had relationships that I left way earlier than I would have left if I was who I was in my 20s, when I stayed in these really toxic spaces for a long time. I can very quickly see if this is not something I want, and I'll take action on it. Not if that sounds cold-hearted. I don't mean it in a cold way, but in a, you know, if it's not going to work for either of us, then let's just move forward. And a lot of this was learned through the spaces in sex work and in BDSM and all of that space.
It's really beautiful, this whole communication piece, I think, that you've brought up earlier, and now it coming through again. It's like just like clarity. It's amazing. I want to bring in a question from Tsai Jung Lee before we start closing up. So she's asking, I wonder, how do you respect your clients as a man and at the same time treat them as a subordinate? Most of them like to be humiliated and feel they are a piece of shit. And we can make their wish come true in a session. Is there a clear border before the session starts and ends? Outside session, they are like just a respectful client. So for I only have personal slaves, basically there is not a clear border for me, but I do want to gain more clients. You can also see the question in the question box, because there's a whole, there's a bunch of elements.
I know.
I guess you may want to come back to.
I'm like, yeah, my brain is like, okay. What was the thing that stood out to me the most? So one of the things I think is that what I always say is like, we are, with my clients, we're equals at all times. Even when we're in session, it is an agreed power exchange, but nobody is less than anyone else. Nobody, even if I'm using language that is saying that, energetically, spiritually, emotionally, we are equals. It's all part of the, and that's why for me it's really important to keep it in a container. I play with my partner, but I don't have like a lifestyle. I'm not a lifestyle dom. I don't have 24/7. I think that's a lot. There's a lot more challenges with that, and it takes a lot more communication, agreement, constant check-ins. I don't have full experience with it, so I wouldn't really want to talk too much on it. It's definitely a lot easier to keep the container safe when you're working on these 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour sessions. Sorry, I can't remember the rest of the question. Where do I see the question?
So in the bottom, there's a thing where it says ask a question, and if you click on it,
okay.
You see.
How you respect your clients as a man, saying. So I guess that the respect element just comes back to the fact that I have so much personal experience being in the submissive space, and I don't see it as a subordination in making them any less of a person or anything. There's no respect taken away there. If anything, they're giving me an incredible gift by giving me their submission. I have the utmost respect for somebody that wants to come in and hand over that to me. Like, that is like, they must have such an incredible respect for me, and therefore I would give that back to them. And having experienced it on the receiving end from the submissive side, I think really helps for me to understand what it feels like and how to make sure that they still feel protected and respected, even if I'm going to do, you know, extreme humiliation, which is actually not something that I'm particularly fond of, but mainly because I wasn't particularly fond of it myself when I was at the other end. And I tend to find that a lot of what I enjoy mirrors what I enjoyed, because I have an embodied experience and knowledge of it. Easier for me to embody it with the other person.
That's beautifully said.
I
Beautifully said. I think we're going to slowly come to a close, and you know, in light of coming to a close, where can everybody find you? What are you running at the moment? Your different workshops? Please share all.
Okay, so yeah, so Authentic Photography, so at Authentic Photography or www.authenticphotography.com, or Mistress Stone, which is mistressstone.com with a hyphen in the middle, and or Mistress Stone 1. I don't know who this other Mistress Stone is. I can't find her, but I had to have Mistress Stone _1 for some reason, which I wasn't happy about. So yeah, so Authentic, I do the Sensuality Sessions, which are full day events, facilitated group events with women that all come together with one-on-one and group coaching practices, photo shoot time, hair and makeup, embodiment practice, movement practice, full free lunch, beautiful vegan lunch, giveaway, just an incredible day. And just even just soaking up the other women's energy is just such a huge part of that experience. I also do one-to-one shoots, so more in-depth individual time, which is just with me. Mistress Stone, I have a workshop on the 29th of June, which is about how to kind of step into your dominant energy and what that might look or feel like. And I also run an experience called the Embodied Dom Experience, which is an in-person experience in London, which is a small group, only 5 or 6 women at a time, which I'll be running the next one in July. Which is a sort of deep dive into discovering what your dominant expression might look like through meditation and visualization and journaling. We kind of tour the dungeon. We talk about session setup and play and what it might look and feel like, and just loads of time to ask a load of questions really as well. Yeah, that's the thing. Amazing. And obviously I also session as well.
Amazing.
That, which I forget about.
And especially for all the men that are listening to this makes an amazing gift to your partners or anyone that you feel that could connect with the space and needs to connect with that space. I think it's beautiful what you're doing, and very thankful that you are.
Thank you.
Maybe I have like one last question, because we spoke about the dungeons a few times. And the question for me is like, because I notice when I'm in different environments, it draws out different parts of my personality. And so for me, the question is like, to what degree do you find having an environment that like reflects that kinky way of being? How, like, to what degree is that important for actually that aspect to really come forth and unfold in that way?
So the environment, you mean? I also, by the way, really love the way that you smile every time you say dungeon.
Yeah, I think that's something for me. Like, that definitely I want to experience that space, and I feel I haven't stepped into it. So it's great having this conversation with you today.
It's really great. Yeah, I think it's really important, but I think it's more about creating that embodiment space for myself. So I have a whole ritual, you know, so like sometimes I go to a hotel that's not always in a dungeon space, so I might not have that actual aesthetic there. So I have the whole ritual at home where I kind of call it like my goddess hour when I'm getting ready. And I play certain playlists and certain music and certain manifestations and various different things that I like to listen to, maybe a meditation. I have certain scents that I really enjoy that make me feel in that space. And then the getting dressed part is like a ritual. You know, again, all of it feels like this really long meditation. The certain element, everyone has a different expression, like certain elements of clothing. For me, I love a really, really, really fucking high boot, like an 8-inch thigh high boot. Just, I can literally step into that place straight away. it can be whatever it is. For me, it's a scent and a shoe. That's what it does for me. But it could be anything. And then I think it's music, it's the way I move, it's everything. Like I feel like I just switch. There's something that like drops in, and then like I have a certain playlist, for example, and I can put that on. And once I'm in the clothes and I'm in the space, and especially once the other person enters the space, I just feel myself like I can be walking to a session like me, like nervous, like giggly, like, oh, Ellie, like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. The half the time I doubt myself all the time. Imposter syndrome is like, lifelong things. And I'm like, oh my God, who am I kidding? I'm not a dominatrix. Oh, what am I doing? And then as soon as I get into that space and I see that person and I hear that music and I feel that outfit, I'm just like, boom. And it's like, she comes over.
I'm curious to hear the playlist.
I have to be careful where I play it. If I play it somewhere where I'm not supposed to be like that, I'm like, turn that off.
It's so beautiful how you say it in the sense, and another way maybe of looking at it is you seduce yourself into that space. And I think we all need to learn how to seduce ourselves into that space.
I think that was lockdown where I learned how to do that. Because I spent, and I had a friend that was when I had a real disconnect with like my own sexual pleasure, like my private, sort of any kind of like self pleasure on my own. She told me to take myself on dates, and I was like, oh, okay, I never thought about that before. And that kind of like, I guess that's what I was doing in seducing myself. But my version of that is like to dress myself up in like the clothes that I love and take photos of myself. That's like me romancing myself, I guess, seducing myself. And then if I'm then in that space, then I can then carry that over and I can share that with whoever that person is, whether it's a client, whether it's my partner, or whether it's just myself.
That's beautiful.
Ellie, it's been super fun having you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for having me on my first ever podcast. Oh my God.
Well, I don't want to say it, but we broke your virginity, and hope it's been a good one and nothing invasive. Thank you for sharing this space with us.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Amazing. And thanks everyone for being here, and Zaitung Lee for asking questions. See you next week when we speak more about heart rate variability and looking at ways of improving well-being from the heart. Ellie, thank you so much. Have an amazing week.
Thank you. You too.
Lots of love.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.